Hello everyone, today we're going to be covering one of the most important parts of OTP in my opinion, which is handling your prospects, helping them develop, and knowing when to promote them. So the number one thing here is going to be ensuring that your prospects develop. It doesn't really matter what level they're in, as long as they are improving until they are ready for the major leagues, and then they can come up and join your big league team. So the first thing I'm going to state is that it's not generally worth looking at your entire farm system and managing every single prospect along the way. But what I do recommend doing is coming to your front office player development and managing your top 20, which is going to be these prospects on the left. I also recommend keeping tabs on any prospects that you think are better than OSA might, or our top 20 prospects, but not necessarily listed on here. For example, if you've got a great fielder who you think is going to be a star in the majors one day, but OTP does not reflect that for prospects, so they don't rank them as a top 20 player. Anyways, once you have an idea of what players you're going to be keeping an eye on, let's just jump right into how to manage each of our prospects. I'm going to be ignoring the players that say MLB because they're essentially no longer prospects. So the first player I've got here is a second base prospect, pretty solid defense, and the hitting looks pretty good as well. The eye is already ready to compete in the majors. Avoid Ks is just a tad low, but the power is really the big thing that still needs to develop on this player. So let's take a look at where they are right now, Double A. And right now, their statistics are primarily at the A level, where he managed a 110 OPS plus, which is, of course, better than average. At high A, which he played about 105 at bats, 135 plate appearances, which is a decent sample size, he had a 135 OPS plus. So what I can see from these statistics are that he has managed to hit at two levels of the minor leagues in at least a decent sample size. And I can confirm that with the ratings that he has. He's going to be putting up high on base percentages like this against minor league talent, and I would certainly expect him to succeed. Now, the one thing that I'm a little concerned about is the lack of power, but obviously that's not going to develop regardless, or it's not going to be reflected at any level. We just need him to develop it with time, and that's going to come by keeping him at a competitive level where he can still be successful. So the number one thing I recommend is making sure that your prospects' ratings line up with what can succeed at a minor league level, and that their statistics match the fact that they are succeeding. For players who you expect to be plus hitters at the major leagues, I recommend that they put up at least an average OPS plus at any minor league level, so 100 OPS plus in a decent sample size before you promote them. Promoting players to the major leagues is a completely different process, which I'll get to in a little bit, but ultimately you want to make sure that players stop at every level of the minor leagues except when you first add them to your system, which I will also discuss later in the video. But you want to make sure that players get time to adapt to each level and time to be successful and improve their ratings. So right now, Beltre is not really challenged at the lower levels of the minors. His ratings are excellent, so we're going to keep him at AA, where he had success in a minimal amount of time last season. So this season, he'll open the year at AA, and we'll try him out there. Now, let's look at a pitching prospect. Jordan Watts is my top pitching prospect according to OSA, and he looks really good. Outstanding stuff potential, which he's already mostly reached. Oddly enough, it's the changeup that's really coming along for him nicely, and the movement and control are lagging slightly behind the development of his changeup. Something important to note is he's only played in short season A, tiny sample size. He didn't even play the entire season as a starter, only 26 innings pitched, but he did put up very good statistics at that level. So we currently have him at high A, that's skipping the A level. That's not a huge problem, especially given how strong his ratings are. It is occasionally okay to skip levels, but I recommend that you have your players at least play at high A, double A, and triple A. But of course, it is okay to skip lower levels of the minors if ratings are strong enough to do so. So in his first full season, he will be starting the year out at high A, where his movement is going to be a weakness. It's probably actually not quite up to snuff at the this level of the minors. We probably want to see him reach 40 movement, but his control and stuff are really strong and should be good enough to keep him afloat. For the record, I currently do not have relative ratings enabled, but if you go to global settings and all ratings are displayed relative to enabled, you can use this as a tool if you're not quite used to what's going to succeed at minor league levels to kind of give you an idea of how a player is going to do at each level. So, for example, going back to Manuel Beltre, we'll set his ratings relative to AA Northwest, and we can see that he's quite clearly going to be a very successful player at that level. So I have no problems using him at the AA level. And you can also see, for example, let's see, we're contemplating promoting him to AAA. He's obviously still a quality hitter at AAA, but he isn't quite ready for that level yet, where he would be at best an average hitter, whereas we think he's going to be pretty successful at the AA level, and we want to give him the opportunity to do so before we throw him into a more challenging environment where he might struggle and therefore fail to develop quite as nicely. Okay, the next thing that we should discuss is recently drafted players, of which Jordan Watts is one. So for starters, I recommend putting a majority of your newly drafted players in Rookie League or Short Season A. A very, very small number, generally college players, quality prospects, are going to be immediately ready for high A or A ball, at which case you're just going to have to once again look at their ratings, see how they performed in college. If their statistics and ratings are good, then maybe it's time to promote them right off the bat. Watts, for example, I probably should have started him off in plain old A ball. He was pretty developed. He is a high school pitcher, so he's a rare, more developed one of those, but ultimately, oh, actually, never mind. He was a college pitcher, so he was probably just a junior college pitcher. And yeah, that's why he would be at that level of the minors. I would want to keep moving him along rather than leave him unchallenged and not developing as effectively. So those are the two things that you want to kind of balance when you're handling your prospects. You want to make sure they're at a high enough level of the minor leagues that they're not just crushing everybody, so they have something to learn, but you want to make sure that you're not pushing them too hard so they don't get overwhelmed, they're unsuccessful, and they can't learn from that either. A general rule that I like to follow is try to keep their morale up. Their morale will drop if they're not performing well, and it will drop if you don't keep them at a high enough level. So as long as that's high, you can generally assume that your players are going to be developing. Furthermore, morale is actually a decent tool in and of itself to help your players develop. So if you have that high, that could give them a nice little boost as well. Now, the next thing that we need to cover is determining when a prospect is ready for the major leagues. The number one thing is, do you have a spot on your roster for this prospect? So let's take a look at Manuel Beltre, for example, and see who my second baseman is right now. I've got Mike Pejuero at second base. So currently, I would say I'm not really in need at second base. I have a guy who's not a horrible fielder. He's a really strong offensive player. He can get the job done. Now, if I have a player who's maybe a stopgap or something and I'm trying to compete, it might be a little more urgent for me to call up my top prospect to take his place in the major league level, but ultimately I feel comfortable with where I am, so I'm in no rush to get Manuel Beltre to the majors. Something I highly recommend is that you are confident that your players can at least perform at an average major league level if you expect them to be an above average bat or above average pitcher at the major league level. You want to make sure that your guys are capable of performing just like they would in the minors so that they can continue to develop while still being challenged, of course, since every player is technically challenged at the major league level, no matter how good they are. And at the same time, they are able to live up to that challenge and be successful. Another thing that we should cover is how to promote glove-only prospects. Now, I don't really have any prospects on this list that I would consider to be exclusively fielders. But for example, if you have an 80-80-80-80 defensive shortstop, that's going to be one of the best players in the league. But he's got no bat. So what you're going to do is make sure he's putting up at least an 80 OPS plus at every level of the minor leagues. And then you may just have him make the jump from AA to the majors or something. because ultimately, no matter where he is, he's not going to be a successful hitter. But of course, because his defense is so good, he's still a very valuable player. Pitchers are a little bit more simple. Hitters are a little bit more simple, but when it comes to fielders, figuring out when to promote them can be a little bit challenging. Anyways, those are pretty much the big things, making sure that your players can be above average hitters and that they are developing at every level of the minors. You will be successful in getting them to the major leagues, generally with a majority of their development intact. I do recommend that you try to have your players as fully developed as possible before you promote them to the major leagues. So Manuel Beltray right now, I'd say he could probably hold his own at the major league level. With another year of development, maybe he's like a 55, 55, 40, 70, 45 type guy, and all that's left to develop is pretty much just his power. That could probably succeed at the major league level, but I'm, again, in no rush to really promote him, and I want him to be as fully developed as possible. Now, this has two major benefits to it. One, it allows you to build the strongest team possible. By not having to worry about developing players on your team actively, you are essentially having a stronger team. And two, it keeps your players under control for a little bit longer. So Beltray, if I were to promote him right now, would be a free agent after his age 26 season. But if I were to keep him in the minors for another 2 years, it would be after his age 28 season. And of course, team control is really important with prospects, especially when their value is not that much greater than the players that you currently have on your team. And that cost benefit analysis is really important. Now, for example, if I had a weaker player playing second base, like for example, let's say I have Josh Allen or something standing in at second base for me, this is a guy I'm not quite as comfortable with at the position. He's clearly not as good as Pujuero. Even right now, Pujuero would probably be a better second baseman than him. But at the same time, I still need Pujuero to develop. However, at the very moment I feel that he's going to be capable of handling major league pitching effectively, he's probably coming up to replace Josh Walsh and help my team win in the short run, in addition to being a valuable piece in the long run. Anyways, guys, I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope that you are able to effectively promote your prospects and get them to the major leagues more fully developed. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you on the next one.